Hey everybody, and welcome to Psych 341. This is cognitive psychology, and so what I wanted this video to be is basically just running through what the broad kind of course structure looks like, so that way you kind of know where the assignments are coming from and things like that throughout the rest of the semester. But I'm gonna try to keep this short because I know that your time is super valuable. So it feels like I'm rushing. Feel free to pause, rewind, or even download the slides that you can find here on the course info page of Plato. All right, so let's get into it. What I want this to be about is basically giving you a broad overview of the class, along with kind of my philosophy about how I'm approaching this class, and finally talking about the grading breakdown. So what kind of assignments we have and why we have those particular kind of assignments. So usually whenever I'm in a classroom, I will ask folks up front, what is cognitive psychology? And you can imagine the kind of response this gets, which is mostly silence. This weird, this weird kind of awkward pause. But chances are, if you've had any psychology class before, you've probably heard this phrase before, though, right? Cognitive psychology. So what does it mean to you? Usually whenever I ask this, a couple of themes come up. One is people talk about the brain. And we are going to talk a lot about the brain this semester. People talk about the mind, or they talk about thoughts. And those are also really important in cognitive psychology. But it's important for us to think about, on a broad scale, what does that mean for us to be studying thoughts and the brain and things like that? And so chapter 1 is really just going to be spending most of our time trying to answer this question. But to give you an idea of what some of the questions are that we're going to be answering this semester, you can see some of them here. So does human memory have a storage limit? We're going to talk about that in chapters 6, 7, and 8. Memory is a huge part of cognitive psychology. It is 3 chapters in our textbook. Should classes be only 15 minutes long? Some researchers suggest that classes, instead of being long and drawn out, should actually be condensed into 15-minute chunks. And you'll actually find a lot of the videos that I post, I try to keep them at about 15 minutes. And we'll talk about why that is in Chapter 5 on attention. We're going to talk about object recognition and how that applies not just to humans, but to non-humans. So we'll look at a couple of studies that look at how pigeons, for example, are able to recognize good art versus bad art, or recognize Picasso versus Monet with a little bit of training. We're going to look at why we misunderstand statistics so much, and I don't mean just you and I mean just the human species generally. Humans are not very good at statistics, and we'll talk about why that is in Chapter 12 when we talk about decision making. And this is usually the most interesting question that I pose, or at least students find it to be the most interesting, is for people that are bilingual speakers, what language does their consciousness, think of or think in? So whenever you're rehearsing things to yourself, whenever you're narrating your life, what language is that in? Those of you that are bilingual speakers already know the answer, but if you're not, then you have to stay in this class, get at least to chapter 10, which is on language, where we will talk more about that particular thing. All right, so you can kind of see here there's lots of variety in these kinds of answers. We're looking at memory, we're looking at attention, but we're also looking at language, and we're looking at decision making, and we're going to be looking at consciousness, and we're going to be looking at visual perception. We're going to be looking at lots of different things in this class. Our textbook, the one that the bookstore carries and asks you to get, is this one right here, the gold one. This is the 7th edition, but if I'm being completely honest with you, I think that the 6th edition is also pretty good. You can't see it because my head is kind of clouding it right now, but the 6th edition should be okay for most purposes in this class. It's going to save you a lot of money doing that. You do not need an access code at all, so don't feel like you need to buy it new, or you don't need to buy the access code or whatever, you know what I mean. You can go for the cheapest option that you can, or the most affordable option. And so I do say beware here, because I'm going to be using all of the 7th edition materials, and so there might be a few differences, but I spent the summer looking through them, and I didn't really find a ton of differences. But if you are interested in what we talk about this semester, there's this other book that I used to require in my cognitive psychology class. I don't anymore because it's just too much reading for one semester. But this is a great resource that I'll refer to a couple of times throughout our semester. And why it's important. But it is a easy read. It is designed for casual audiences. It's not designed for students. It's not designed for scholars. It's designed for your mom and dad. It's designed for your cousin and nephew. It's for everybody. But we'll talk more about that later. But so really the book that you need is just going to be the textbook, whether that be the 7th edition or the 6th edition. All right, so a very quick bit about teaching philosophy. If you've already looked at the syllabus, you know there are lots and lots of assignments in this class. And I don't do that to be mean. I do it because research shows that basically when people retain information from a class, it's usually because they were tested a lot on it throughout the semester. And so I try to incorporate lots of these small, low-impact assignments, which basically just means that there's lots of assignments, but there's not just one of them that counts for a huge portion of your grade. So it's okay if you make a couple of mistakes. It's okay if you don't do well in the first exam, because there's plenty of other grading opportunities throughout the semester. So these assignments have different purposes, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment, for what these assignments are and what purpose they serve. And even though it is a lot of work, I do want everybody to do well. I want everybody to do well in this class, and so I'm not trying to trick people. I'm not trying to ask very super detail-oriented or nitpicky questions on exams. If you ever feel like I am, feel free to let me know so that we can work on that, because I'm not trying to trick anybody with the quizzes or with the exam. And so this is my little pep talk, this moment right here, where I talk about the teaching philosophy, which is that the way that I see our class is not adversarial. In other words, it's not me versus you. The way that I think about it is that it's us versus the content. So it is us versus, the course as a subject matter. So we are going to work together to try to understand this material as well as possible and ace these exams so that we can beat it, basically. So if you want to think about it as, like a sports situation where the Westfield Owls and the book and the subject matter, the course content is going to be the Cognitive Badgers, or whatever team you don't like you can put in here. So if you don't like the Steelers, it can be the Cognitive Steelers or whatever. But we want to beat this. But even though we are on the same side, I have more of a coach figure. So I'm standing on the sidelines, and I'm going to try to give you whatever advice I can so that you can do well in this class. I want to give you whatever tips, tricks, strategies, study habits that I can, so that way you can go out and you can, run up the board against the Cognitive Badgers, so to speak. Because I can't step out on the field for you, but I want to try to give you everything that I can so that we can all do really well in this class. This information you can also find in the syllabus. The only thing I really want to highlight, though, is that I try to be as flexible as possible with office hours. These are just the ones that I had to assign myself. Because all professors have to assign themselves office hours. If these don't work for you, please let me know and we can work something else out. You just email me and we can find something that works a little bit better for your schedule. Even if it is a remote meeting, if we need to Skype, or if we need to conduct it over, like a chat room type thing, or through voice communication, I guess that is Skype. We can figure it out. Also, the best way to reach me is through email. Plato does have its own messaging service, but I find that my phone doesn't often get those notifications, and so if you email me, I'm much more responsive to those emails. I do have a new office this semester, so if you are a student that I've had before, I used to be down here in this room, but now I am up in the Psych main office towards the very end, towards the back there, so that's where you can find me if you want to meet in person, if you can. All right, now very quickly, the grading breakdown. So what kind of assignments do we have? Basically 4 different categories. We have exams, we have online quizzes, online discussions, and research assignments. So let's go through each of these and see what they do. The exams, these are worth 2/5 of your grade, so worth 40%, which sounds like a lot, but whenever you think about it as 4 instances of 10%, then it's not so bad. One exam is only 10% of your grade. But with that being said, it means that if you were to just not do an exam, if you just didn't want to do it, you're feeling too stressed out and you just didn't do it, that's an entire letter grade. And that kind of thing is something I've seen a lot in online classes, is that somebody will skip an assignment, and even though it is a low impact score, it's only 10%, that can really count against you. So if you're a star student and you ace everything and you skip an exam, the highest grade you can make is a B, basically. So there are 4 of those throughout the semester. The format is fill in the blank and short answer. So a little bit more fill in the blanks than short answer. The short answer are meant to be 2 to 3 sentences. I'll talk more about this as the first exam comes closer and what kinds of things you can look out for, how you can prepare yourself there. But basically the exams are going to cover everything. So everything that we talk about on Play-Doh, in our class, on the lecture, or the videos that I have are going to be eligible for being on the exam. The final exam is going to be cumulative. We'll talk more about that as that gets closer, but the cumulative portion of it is not meant to be terrifying. It's not meant to be super hard. I'm going to try to keep it broad because, again, research shows that people retain the most whenever you have a cumulative exam. But I don't want to make it hard. I don't want it to be punishing. I don't want it to be punishment. Here. The quizzes and the discussions are all going to be due Friday at 5 p.m. So basically at the end of the work week. So I know a lot of you like to work over the weekend. You probably have a full-time job over the weekday, and you use the weekends to catch up with your school assignments. That's fantastic. I do that too whenever I take online classes. And so what I would recommend is, this means I would probably, if you can, try to get ahead of the curve, because what happens is, let's say that you know that something is due Friday at 5 p.m. Go ahead and knock it out the Saturday and Sunday before this. So it's almost, you're almost a whole week ahead of schedule if you do it this way. But that way you don't have to worry about trying to cram it in during the weekday whenever you're really busy. And so it's always Friday at 5 p.m. I'll have all those things graded over the weekend as those assignments come in. I do hope that you do read ahead of the lectures. I'm not going to enforce that with quizzes or anything like that. Research shows that is better for learning, to read beforehand. But these quizzes are basically straight from the textbook. They're 12 multiple choice questions, and you get an entire hour to do that. And so it is open book, so feel free to open the book in front of you, scan through it as you're answering these questions, because again, mostly what I want is just to keep you engaged with the textbook, even whenever we don't have an exam that week. So that way you're getting multiple exposure to it. The online discussions on Play-Doh, these are going to be open-ended questions. Some of them are going to be tied into real-world problems. Some of them are going to be basic cognitive experiments that you're going to do online and then answer a few questions online. Those are also going to be due at Friday at 5 p.m. You can find a rubric online that is going to tell you exactly what you need to do on a discussion to make a 100 to get full credit. Essentially, just do a good job of tying in this discussion with what we've talked about as a class through the lecture or through the videos, and also relating it back to real-world, situations, and then replying to another student's post. So just be thoughtful. You'll probably get a really good credit for doing that. The research assignments, there are going to be 6 total readings throughout the semester. In previous semesters, I would have all of this clumped into one assignment at the very end, a big final paper. I'm not going to do it that way this time. Instead, I'm going to break it up so that you're going to have 6 different papers throughout that are much smaller. So here we have these are meant to be basically about 2 pages double spaced of information. So you're going to summarize the information, and then you're going to answer some questions you'll find on Play-Doh about them. If you tune into the How to Use Play-Doh video that I'm also posting here, you'll see more information about that too. But you can find all those online, and basically they're just meant to expand on the research side of things, what we talk about in class. Other details, if you have any kind of accommodations through Bonacos that you want me to be aware of, just let me know. I'm happy to work with you on that. I don't tolerate plagiarism. Please don't do it, especially on the exams. I would much rather you just paraphrase something online and then give me the reference to it or the citation. Let me know where you got that information, so that way you're being as honest as possible about where you got that information, and it doesn't look sneaky, it doesn't look suspicious, it doesn't look like you tried to pass off someone else's work as your own. You're citing it, which is great. I'm not going to give you a 0 for doing that, whereas you would get a 0 if you were to plagiarize or to paraphrase something that you took from another author without credit. So always, when in doubt, just cite the information. So yeah, if you have any questions about that, if you're worried about that, let me know, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And also, don't forget office hours. A lot of online students aren't able to come in, sometimes because of distance reasons, and that's okay. Let me know what time works for you that we can meet, and we will. So the first week, basically just get used to Play-Doh, get used to the system. The first assignments aren't actually going to be due until next week, next Friday. So take your time, explore a little bit, read some a little bit, look at some of the videos, and then next week we're going to hit the ground running. All right. I tried to keep it at 15 minutes. I went a little bit long, but I'll see you in the discussion forums. Bye.